It is the Sengoku Jidai. Besieged and surrounded by his enemies, a lord pays a group of men to see his only child to safety. But do they have the skill to ensure her safety? And can they even be trusted? For this is an age of honor and treachery, of blood and valor, of gold and steel. Now available at Amazon, Smashwords, and at studiobrainstorm.net. Links in the description. Year 50 of the imperial calendar would prove an eventful year for Rokugan. Although the long reign of the Hantei dynasty is generally referred to as the 1,000 Years of Peace, in reality that was more of a clever name rather than an actual reflection of the realities of clan relations in the Emerald Empire. And so what followed that year was never officially recognized as a war, but was the very first example of inter-clan violence. And it begins, unsurprisingly, with the Matsu family. Back when the very first Emerald tournament was held in year 23 of the Empire, the final round came down to two warriors. Kakita, sword master, future husband of Doji and co-founder of the Crane clan, and Matsu, warrior woman, founding member of the Lion clan, and, at the time, the love interest of Akodo. No two warriors could have been more different in their personalities. Kakita was graceful, precise, and efficient, much like his own style of swordsmanship. He was also the soul of politeness, showing respect to his opponents after he bested them. Matsu won her bouts through strength, ferocity, and aggression, and when she won, was often arrogant and rude to her fallen foes. And so, when Kakita finally bested Matsu in that final round, he decided to call her out on it, pointing out that someone who shows no respect to others is undeserving of respect themselves. Unfortunately, Matsu did not take criticism well, a trait that she would pass on to the family that bears her name. In her eyes, Kakita's words were not a reproach, but a direct stain upon her honor, and so she declared eternal enmity against the Crane swordsman. Of course, nothing really came of this. Matsu was the Lion Thunder and died heroically fighting Fu Lang. But unfortunately, the one-sided feud did not die with her. After the Day of Thunder, leadership of the Matsu family was passed to her eldest daughter, Matsu Kiriko. And she not only inherited the title of daimyo, but also the grudge. Of course, Kakita himself was dead by this point, but for Kiriko, that was no issue. It just meant that in her eyes, the newly created Kakita family would have to pay the price of Matsu vengeance. But despite the stereotypical image of the Matsu as brainless berserkers, Kiriko was no fool. If she was going to pull off what she intended to pull off, she knew that she was going to need imperial sanction. And so Kiriko went to court, and was apparently an eloquent enough speaker that she successfully persuaded Emperor Genji that the insult to her mother was an insult to the Matsu as a whole, and needed to be avenged. Thus, Emperor Genji eventually gave his blessing to the idea of the Matsu launching a large-scale raid into Kakita lands. No sooner did the Emperor give his approval than Matsu Kiriko assembled a sizable army of thousands of warriors and struck. The attacking force marched straight through one of the Daidoji provinces and struck deep into the lands owned by the Kakita. Villages and towns were torched. Castles fell. What defenders the Crane could muster were contemptuously swept aside by a wave of steel and the kind of berserk fury that has made the Matsu name both famed and feared across the empire. Then, after a few weeks of smashing and burning everything in their path, the Matsu simply stopped, turned around, and went home. They may not be as polite or as cultured or as refined as the Crane clan, but in battle, the Matsu and the Lion clan were indisputably superior. No longer could the Crane look down on them. Honor was satisfied. Yet again though, Matsu Kiriko demonstrated that she was as clever as she was ruthless. She knew that the Crane would almost certainly retaliate for this attack. So, while she sent the bulk of the Matsu army home, she took a small force with her to lay siege to a Kakita castle. Inevitably, Kiriko was killed in the fighting, achieving the glorious death in battle that all Matsu warriors strive to achieve. But there was a further method to this seeming madness. It was well known across the empire that Kiriko had been the instigator of this attack on the Crane clan, and now she was dead, which meant that in the eyes of the empire as a whole, the Crane no longer had a valid casus belli to retaliate against the lion. Thus, Matsu Kiriko not only died an honorable death as befits a samurai, she had also ensured that her enemies could have no basis to seek vengeance against her. Of course, the Crane weren't stupid, and they quickly figured out that this had been Kiriko's plan from the very start. And while, as she'd expected, they couldn't exact their own vengeance, they did not forgive or forget, and the enmity between the two families became mutual, and it would very quickly drag their respective clans into the conflict as well. Thus, what had begun as a personal and mostly one-sided dispute between two individuals bloomed into one of the greatest long-running clan rivalries in the history of the Emerald Empire. The next few years were mostly quiet for the Empire. In year 53, Emperor Genji made a significant legal reform by denouncing the use of magic in legal proceedings and declaring that the testimony of ancestral spirits was no longer admissible as evidence in court. 2 years later, his uncle, the Lion Clan Kami Akodo, presented him with Leadership, Akodo's great treatise on war, command, and strategy. Leadership was Akodo's masterwork, the culmination of decades of battlefield experience. Unsurprisingly, Leadership is, to this day, one of the most widely read texts in all of the Empire, as it essentially is the art of war of Legend of the Five Rings. Of course, knowledge is power, especially knowledge of warfare, and legend has it that when Akodo presented Leadership to Genji, his brother, the ever-suspicious Kami Bayushi, insisted that a truly clever general would either never reveal such hard-won wisdom or share only lesser insights into strategy and combat with outsiders. According to the sources, Akodo himself made no comment to this. Year 57 saw the death of Asako, one of the founding members of the Phoenix Clan, and the establishment of one of the great port cities of the Emerald Empire, Clearwater Village, a joint clan effort being mostly built by the Crab but on Crane soil, a detail that would unfortunately contribute to war between the two clans a few centuries down the road. The 60s proved to be an especially uneventful decade, the only event of note happening in the year 61 when the Emperor ordered the construction of the first Shinto temple of the Empire, the Shrine of Discussion. While Genji was himself a genuine believer in the way of Shinsei, he mostly used this as a publicity stunt, as a way of convincing the other great clans to adopt and spread Shinsei's teachings across the empire. The empire otherwise remained quiet until the year 72, in which the Phoenix clan was rocked by both a great discovery and a great tragedy. The discovery was of a 4-year-old boy with strange green-gold eyes, who was somehow, despite being so young, and having never read the work of Shinsei before, could still quote entire chapters of Shinto religion by heart. He was quickly given into the care of the Isawa family and the Council of 5 Elemental Masters. They bestowed upon the boy the name Wiku, which means gift. And the Elemental Masters soon discovered that not only could this boy quote entire sections of the Tao of Shinsei by rote, but he also had the gift of prophecy. For this, Wiku would be known forever after as the Serene Prophet, though I think that former part has to be some kind of cruel irony, as the youth's life was anything but serene. Wiku, it seemed, was something akin to a low-functioning autist. He spoke constantly in riddles and nonsensical phrases that left everybody else scratching their heads. What's worse, his prophetic visions grew more numerous and intense as he grew older, sometimes leaving him feverish and bedridden for days. Of course, the Phoenix clan recorded everything he said and made multiple copies, and soon enough, the prophecies of Wiku, as they were known, were as well known throughout the empire as the Tao of Shinsei. Wiku would ultimately die in the year 90 at the age of 22, seemingly destroyed by the power of his own gift. The only noteworthy event of his life that we know of is that, later, near the end of it all, he encountered Bayushi Daijin, then clan champion of the Scorpion, and spoke to him at length of his visions. It is said that in the days afterward, Daijin was plagued by nightmares that ultimately drove him mad. Raving like a lunatic, he disappeared into Bayushi's Labyrinth, the great catacomb maze built beneath the castle of Kyuden Bayushi, and was never heard from again, though legend would persist that his ghost stalked the corridors of the labyrinth to this day. Legend also says that when Daijin went mad, he brought a copy of Wiku's prophecies with him into the labyrinth, and there the scrolls would lie, all but forgotten for 1,000 years. The second great event of the year 72 involved not a person, but a magical artifact, the last wish of Isawa. Shortly before the war with Fu Lang began, Isawa had labored to create a semi-sentient magical matrix that he called the Last Wish. It could take on almost any form, although it usually assumed the aspect of a glowing sphere. It could communicate directly with spirits and the kami, and it had the power to alter reality itself when wielded by a shugenja who understood its true potential. The Last Wish was originally intended to be a wedding present, given by Isawa to his daughter Akiko, which would then be presented to her then soon-to-be husband, Asako Sagoten, at their wedding. The marriage itself, of the children of two important shugenja and founding members of the Phoenix clan, was to be a sign of the unity and increased good relations between the two families. But then Isawa died on the Day of Thunder, sacrificing his life to seal away Fu Lang. Then, shortly afterwards, the Isawa discovered that the Asako were hiding something from them. This thing was the Path of Man, a means of obtaining enlightenment and possibly even human ascension to a kind of godhood. This had been entrusted to Asako and her family by the spirit of Shiba shortly after his death at the hands of the first Oni. Shiba had been entrusted with the knowledge of the Path of Man by Shinsei himself, and now, as a ghost, he entrusted it to the Asako family, telling them to only reveal its knowledge when mankind was ready to learn it. Unfortunately, the Isawa really like knowledge, and they really hate it when people keep knowledge from them. The dispute only got worse when the matter of the Last Wish was brought into play. Both families had contributed to its creation, even if Isawa was the primary architect. What's more, the Last Wish was incomplete. These arguments over the possession of the Last Wish and the Asako family's reticence to reveal the secrets of the Path of Man caused relations between the two families to go downhill fast, to the point where an Asako killed an Isawa in an argument over the Last Wish itself, which led Akiko to call off the marriage between her and Sagoten. At the same time, the Isawa were also making enemies of the Shiba family. The Isawa had always resented the idea of the kami and their claim to rule humanity for their own good. Isawa himself, in fact, had only agreed to join the war against Fu Lang after Shiba had humbled himself by kneeling before the Master Shugenja and pledging to protect his family. Both man and kami had died on the Day of Thunder, and in the aftermath, the Isawa were quick to claim that Shiba's gesture was one of submission to Isawa, and as such, that their family, led by the Council of Elemental Masters, should rule the Phoenix clan instead of the clan champion, in this case Shiba's son and heir, Tsuzaki. Naturally, the Shiba family resented this, but Tsuzaki, guided by the spirit of his father, who now resided within Ofushikai, the ancestral sword of the Phoenix clan, valued clan unity over asserting his right to rule. Thus, he allowed the Isawa family to attain preeminence, making the Phoenix clan the only great clan not ruled by a clan champion or a descendant of the founding kami. And so it was while the three great families of the Phoenix were turning against one another that Emperor Genji decided to weigh in on the issue of the Last Wish. The Emperor attempted to mediate the issue, but both the Isawa and Asako families insisted that the wish belonged solely to them. What's more, Genji became increasingly fearful of its great power, and initially insisted that the Last Wish should be destroyed. All such attempts failed, as the Last Wish had obtained sentience and killed all of its would-be destroyers. Eventually, the Emperor decided to entrust the Last Wish to the Shiba, the only Phoenix family that didn't have a stake in this particular fight. Thus, the last wish remained undisturbed until the year 72, when Asako Sagoten, desperate to recover Akiko's love, stole it from its hiding place and went to her castle at Shiro Akiko in an attempt to win her back. Sagoten was a young man of great resentment and anger. During the war with Fuleng, his father, the Shugenja Yogo, had been cursed by the mad god to one day betray those he cared for most. Despairing and about to commit seppuku, Yogo was persuaded by Bayushi to defect to the Scorpion clan. Separated from his wife and son, he could presumably do them no harm, and since he had no love for the Scorpion clan, he was no threat to them, curse or no curse. Thus, the Yogo family of the Scorpion clan was established. Unsurprisingly, neither Asako nor Sagoten took Yogo's defection very well, leading some to believe that this was in fact the very betrayal Yogo had been cursed to commit, and indeed Sagoten never forgave his father for what he did. We'll never know for sure, as the nature of the Yogo curse is that only a member of the Yogo family knows when he or she has fulfilled it. If indeed leaving his family for the Scorpion clan was Yogo's fated betrayal, he took the knowledge of it to his grave. It's not hard to see Sagoten interpreting Akiko's cancellation of their marriage as yet another betrayal by someone he loved. Perhaps driven mad by bitterness and desperation, he stole the last wish and took it to Akiko's castle, intending to use its reality-warping powers to make her fall in love with him again. Instead, the last wish's power ran out of his control and completely destroyed the castle of Shiro Akiko and killed all within. His worst fears confirmed, the emperor declared once more that the Shiba family should take custody of the last wish and conceal it so thoroughly that no one could ever find it and use it again. But if the 70s was a time of destruction, death, and endings, the following decade would be one of birth and new beginnings, specifically the birth of the first minor clans.